Brian Bowen. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff for Attorney General Leslie Rutledge. Thank you for joining us for the Youth Vaping Summit. I'd like to go ahead and kick it off and welcome our first speaker, Dr. Debbie Jones. She is currently the Superintendent of Bentonville Schools and has more than 25 years of education experience, previously serving as the Assistant Commissioner for Learning Services at the Arkansas Department of Education. She has served on the Northwest Arkansas American Heart Association Board of Directors and publicly took a stand against vaping after seeing too many students, primarily high school students, become addicted. Please help me welcome Dr. Debbie Jones.
Good afternoon, and thank you for taking time out of your afternoon to join us for an important conversation that affects our youth. It is my honor to welcome Leslie Rutledge this afternoon. Leslie is the 56th Attorney General of Arkansas and the first woman in Arkansas history to hold this role. Since taking office, she has significantly increased the number of arrests and convictions against those who target our children. That includes those who lure our children online, those who abuse their own, and those who would tell them vaping isn't really dangerous. I'm grateful for the stance that our Attorney General has taken on the subject of vaping and the support she's shown Bentonville schools. Please welcome Arkansas Attorney General Leslie Rutledge.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Dr. Jones, so much for hosting us at this beautiful campus. I mean, what an incredible campus. Back in my day, we didn't have this sort of auditorium. And I'm really wishing I had fewer Methodists in the crowd and more Assemblies and Pentecostal, because that way, there's plenty of room up front, guys. We won't call on you. We won't force any products on you. So please feel free to come on up and be engaged in the conversation if you like. Big thank you to Arkansas Children's and the University of Arkansas Medical Sciences for partnering with us on this vaping summit. We held one Monday in Little Rock, and so today's summit is our second one, and we have an incredible lineup of panelists and speakers for you today. As I've traveled across all 75 counties this year and over the last several years, but this year in particular, I have heard from every single school administrator about the challenges they're facing in their schools with teen and preteen use of e-cigarettes and vaping. It has become a distraction, but more importantly, a danger for Arkansas students. And it's something that we must address now and hear directly from medical experts. And that's why the first panel this afternoon is so important. All of these educators asked me during these panels, or rather during these roundtable meetings, Leslie, what are we going to do about this problem? We are beside ourselves about what to do. They have implemented everything from fines to suspensions on kids, talking to their parents. And many of us understand that educating parents is the first step in addressing this challenge. As I left the house this morning, I looked at my 15-month-old daughter, Juliana, and I thought to myself, what will she be facing in 12 or 15 years? None of us saw this epidemic coming. We could not have imagined that in 2019 we would be addressing an entire generation becoming addicted to nicotine and how we get those young people unhooked from nicotine. We're taking a number of steps at the Attorney General's office to address this problem. In addition to these educational opportunities, we also are looking at enforcement actions. On Monday, I announced that we sent a letter to the CEO of eBay asking eBay to remove all electronic nicotine devices and products from its platform. Likewise, we sent letters to 100 online e-cigarette retailers informing them that it is illegal to ship products with tobacco into the state of Arkansas. So just to be clear, if you sell e-cigarette products to Arkansas's youth, there will be consequences. It's important that we hold those people accountable. But again, our biggest hurdle is ignorance and educating young people, educating teachers, educating parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles. We are working against years of misinformation and misleading advertising regarding e-cigarettes from the manufacturers who have been telling people that it's so much safer than traditional cigarettes, when in fact, we don't know if it's safe at all. We must overtake this problem before this problem of vaping and e-cigarette use overtakes our youth. We must replace fiction with facts when it comes to vaping. And we must encourage Generation Z to be nic-free. I think many of these kids, whether here at Bentonville High School or across the state of Arkansas, would be shocked to learn that Juul, the name brand for e-cigarettes, it's now the Coca-Cola, the Xerox of e-cigarettes and vapes, that Juul is owned, 35% of Juul is owned by cigarette manufacturers. The same people who produce and manufacture cigarettes are the same folks who produce and manufacture something to get off of cigarettes. They just learn how to disguise their products better. And we hope that parents and students across the state are listening. Because I know that if we want to see true change in our state, in our country, true change doesn't come from the State House. It comes from your own house. We've launched a statewide public service announcement regarding vaping that will be part of a video that will be shown in just a moment. And we hope to better reach more Arkansans through the use of this public service announcement, through the use of social media, and for all of us here today. So from today's summit and from Monday's summit, we'll be taking some of the best points, stories that move you, that impact you, and we'll be putting that together and sharing that with our Department of Education, sharing that with educators across the state so they can show that to young people and teens so we may stop this vaping epidemic before it takes over our young people. Thank you all, God bless you all, and I hope that you enjoy the summit. We'll be back after a while, but for now, here's this video. Thank you.
E-cigarettes, vape pens, Juuls. They're often marketed as safe alternatives to smoking, but their cool designs, fun flavors, and the fact that they're easy to hide means it's not only smokers who want them, it's kids. And for kids, they're definitely not safe. Teens should absolutely not use Juuls, e-cigarettes, or any similar products. Here's why. When kids use Juuls or other e-cigarettes, they're getting a big dose of nicotine. This disrupts their brain development. It changes the connections between brain cells, causing problems with learning, mood, and impulse control. It makes depression and anxiety worse.
And as any smoker can tell you, nicotine is highly addictive. That makes it very difficult to quit e-cigarettes. And vaping makes it much more likely that kids will smoke real cigarettes later. It's true that a few e-cigarette brands don't contain nicotine, but most of them do. And all of them contain other dangerous chemicals like these. Formaldehyde, which is found in glue and embalming fluid. Diacetyl, which causes lung disease. Benzene, that's a carcinogen linked to leukemia. Some tests have also found metal particles in the e-cigarette vapor. The devices themselves can also be unsafe. They can explode.
The long-term effects of using e-cigarettes are unknown.
And because there are no standards, we don't know the ingredients in these products.
We don't want children to take unnecessary risks with their health.
and begin a lifelong addiction to nicotine.
So what's the story with vaping? Vaping devices like e-cigarettes or pods heat the liquid that usually contains nicotine and other chemicals to create an aerosol, also known as vapor, which is then inhaled into the lungs. Because vaping is relatively new, long-term research on how it impacts people's health is still ongoing. We do know that people who vape are choosing to inhale some pretty toxic chemicals in a way that hasn't been fully studied. Even though vaping products are marketed as a way to help quit smoking, data on their effectiveness is mixed. Because many contain high levels of nicotine, people are at risk of becoming more addicted. In fact, one study found that 63% of people with Juul didn't realize they were using nicotine at all. The bottom line, vaping may be promoted as being safer than smoking, but that doesn't mean it's safe.
Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, and you're watching the Rutledge Report. Young children and teens are using e-cigarettes and vapes because they believe it's safe, when in reality, it's not. And parents don't even know because vapes are easy to disguise and they don't stink. Kids, don't get Nick sick and get the facts straight before you vape. The Attorney General's office, we will do the fighting for you. Call us at 800-482-8982 or visit arkansasag.gov.
Panel of speakers. I'll begin with our moderator, Dr. Joe Thompson. Dr. Thompson is the president of the Arkansas Center for Health Improvement. His work is centered at the intersection of clinical care, public health, and health policy. Dr. Thompson has been guiding Arkansas's innovative initiatives to improve health systems, access to care, quality, and cost across the state. Dr. Pebbles Fagan has more than 20 years of experience in conducting research into tobacco prevention and controlled cancer prevention and control. She has an extensive background in research that aims to reduce health disparities. Dr. Sarah Reed is a pediatric hospitalist at Arkansas Children's Northwest in Springdale, Arkansas. She received her medical degree at the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine, where her research focused on cancer pathways and the importance of a particular protein that prevents cancer growth. Dr. Greg Dupuy is the medical director and chief of emergency medicine at Arkansas Children's Northwest in Springdale. He specializes in emergency care for the critically ill or injured patient from birth through young adulthood. Please help me welcome our next panel.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here today. We hope to have an exciting conversation with our two Northwest Arkansas Children's Hospital physicians here and by tele-link to the UAMS College of Public Health in Little Rock. I thought I would start off just with a little bit of a status quo about what we know about vaping in the state of Arkansas. We know that 20% of our high school students are current users. Unfortunately, we know that 44% of our high school seniors have tried an e-cigarette at some point in their experience. We know that our middle school students have been exposed to not only the presence of e-cigarettes in their schools, but also the presence on the internet for advertising, clearly targeting and making attractive the use of e-cigarettes for younger and younger ages. And importantly, I think we're here today in part because we're starting to see the tip of the iceberg on the health effects, and we'll talk some about that. As of the first of the month, there have been over 1,000 hospitalizations for health-related pneumonitis, pneumonias, 18 deaths. Actually, those hospitalizations are across all of our 48 contiguous states, 18 deaths. We know that 70% of individuals with these are male, that 80% are under the age of 35, with 16% under the age of 18, 20% under the age of 20. So this is a new epidemic, I fear, and we have been talking about in the health circles that we're seeing a sentinel event by hospitalization, but the actual breadth of the effect for those who are not hospitalized yet, we have no idea where the edge of that boundary starts. So I look forward to our conversation today. We've got some questions and we've got some experts, so let's jump off and we'll see where we end up. First of all, let's just tackle, and Dr. Reed, I may just ask you, are e-cigarettes really safer than smoking cigarettes?
Okay. No, the direct answer is no. In fact, one e-cigarette, one juice that they put into the e-cigarette can contain as much nicotine as a whole pack of cigarettes, and so that's a very common misconception that teenagers think that when they're using e-cigarettes that they're actually being safer and they're being healthier than if they were to smoke a cigarette. And so it's a common misconception that it's not.
Great. And I forgot my prop. This is actually a jewel. And this is actually the pod that Dr. Reed mentions that has as much nicotine as a whole pack of cigarettes. And unfortunately, many of our high school students can consume one of these in 30 to 45 minutes. So the nicotine effect is far stronger than actually the traditional use of historic cigarettes. So this is for anybody who wants to see it. I won't let you try it, but you can see it afterwards. So Dr. Dupuy, there's a lot of talk about these being used for cessation devices. Are they effective in this manner, and under what circumstances should one try to think about this as a cessation device?
Sure. So the industry, again, as Attorney General Rutledge mentioned, the industry has marketed these jewels or vapes as a way to stop smoking and as a safer alternative. And the truth is, we don't know. We don't have data to say whether they are safer or not. We know that the set of carcinogens and the things that are actually being inhaled and then even exhaled as secondhand, instead of secondhand smoke, secondhand vape, that is being exhaled are also carcinogens. But initially we didn't have that data. We were, as a healthcare industry, we're actually caught a little bit flat-footed in these companies coming out and very insidiously marketing these first as an alternative and as a stop smoking method, similar to what you would think as a nicotine patch or a nicotine lozenge to be able to help in your smoking cessation. So they tried to make them equivalent, but the more information that we gain, we know that they are not nearly as safe. One is the industry would like for you to believe, but certainly even by comparison to people who are using other methods of nicotine supplementation. So in terms of using these as part of a smoking cessation regimen, in an adult who has a long-term smoking history, there probably is some benefit, although truthfully the studies are mixed as to how effective and how safe they are. But for example, my own mother, who is a long-term smoker, has been able to stop smoking cigarettes and was able to transition. She was not very successful with patches or with lozenges, but was able to vape, transition her vape under the care of her physician, and then was actually able to wean herself off of the nicotine-containing cartridges. So there's anecdotal experience, but certainly no experience or suggestion that these are in any way, shape, or form safe to start, particularly for a teenager and adolescent.
I think you make a very important point. Nicotine itself, which has no pharmacologic benefit, is as addictive as cocaine. So if you're going to use it as a cessation pathway, you need an accountability partner, physician, somebody else It's making sure you don't become even more exposed to that highly addictive chemical compound.
Absolutely, and again, my own mother being able to use these, similar to how her physician would work with her to wean down the concentration of her lozenges or of her patches, was monitored and held accountable for that during her smoking cessation journey.
Can you guess what the long-term consequences of using e-cigarettes over an extended time as opposed to a reduction time could be for someone, or do we know yet?
I don't know that we know yet. I don't know that we know, but the fallacy that e-cigarettes are safe because they don't have the carcinogens that cigarette smoke does is just untrue. And the more studies that we do and the more data that we gain, we know that is not true at all.
And in fact, because the Food and Drug Administration has not sanctioned any e-cigarette as a risk reduction product, they took action against the e-cigarettes, and that's why this week you no longer see advertising as a safer alternative to tobacco. The FDA has not sanctioned any e-cigarette as a safe alternative to tobacco. Dr. Fagan, let's bring you in. Can you help us around this space of cancer? Can e-cigarettes cause cancer in human use?
That's a great question. We know from our own studies, we've tested some of the e-liquids that contain nicotine to determine whether there are carcinogens in the e-liquid. And we know that there are. Our studies that we have done with our team here at UAMS have shown that. And there are a host of other studies that show that there are traces of carcinogens in these products. I mean, you saw in the video some of these constituents such as formaldehyde, and benzene, which is in the nicotine salts that are used in products like Juuls. Those things cause cancer. What we don't know is there enough of the carcinogens and heavy metals in these e-liquids that would long-term cause lung cancer or other tobacco-related cancers. That's the big unknown in this particular situation, but we do know that in unheated e-liquids, there are traces of carcinogens. When you heat these products, of course, some of them can reach past the point of combustion because of the powers of the batteries, that you can get more harmful constituents, but we still are learning more about the long-term health consequences as it relates to cancer. We do know that studies have shown that there is an increased risk for heart disease, and those have been fairly conclusive.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we are seeing the same playbook, just on a much accelerated time frame that we saw with cigarettes. Cigarettes were deemed to not be harmful. Then we had a low-tar cigarette that was supposed to be safer, that was not. Continued advertising to youth to get them addicted, to become lifelong consumers. We're just seeing it in a much more compressed time frame of a few years as opposed to a few decades. Dr. Reed, from a person's lungs, how is vaping different than smoking a cigarette?
So a lot of it has to do with the actual vaping liquid that is used in the vape devices. So smoking is actually an inhalant, it's a smoke, but the vapor is actually a liquid base. And so we don't know exactly what's leading to the lung symptoms in particular related to vaping, but we do know that it's a different substance than what you would get from a cigarette. So there's been concern about the vitamin E oil. There's also been concern from some of the waxy substances that are related to the THC that people use in their vaping devices. And when you take that substance, add some heat to it, turn it into something that turns into a vapor, then when it gets back into the body, it can cool back down. And so there's potential and concern that maybe that substance then is more now like a waxy substance that's on the inside of the lung. And so that then can lead to blocking of small airways and then result in some of the symptoms we see, like coughing, lung irritation, and even lung failure where they're having difficulty breathing.
I think what most people don't recognize is there's no regulatory oversight of the development of e-liquids. We could mix it in our bathtub and take it to the vape shop and sell it as a product without anyone to know what is in the e-liquid itself, and I think that's where we're seeing some of the contaminants. Dr. DeQuick, what about the cardiovascular issues on long-term e-cigarette use?
Sure. I think as Dr. Fagan alluded to, we know that there are negative long-term consequences to long-term nicotine use. And the same way that cigarettes have nicotine in them, obviously these Juuls and vape products also have nicotine. And unfortunately, potentially at higher concentrations because they're unregulated. So not only does the liquid have a higher concentration in it, teens in particular are using them at a greater rate than just smoking cigarettes. So we know that there are long-term cardiovascular consequences, increased risk for coronary artery disease, increased risk for stroke, for neurovascular disease, as well as long-term risks for peripheral vascular disease. So the things that we have seen traditionally with cigarettes with long-term cardiovascular effects. So, and again, while we don't have definitive studies on the vape liquid, we know the primary ingredient being nicotine has been very robustly studied in relation to the cigarette literature.
For either of our pediatricians, how does the use of e-cigarettes potentially affect our adolescents' brain development and other activities there in their central nervous system?
So everybody's brains develop up until they're 25 years old, and so you are introducing a substance that can have direct effects on the development of their brain at a very key time in their development. And so the long-term effects we see and have been studied extensively with nicotine is impulse control. They're also more apt to be addicted to substances and lead to further addiction down the road for them in their life. And then there's also other issues with memory and just overall impulse control. And so these teenagers are using these substances at a very important time in their brain development, and it's just not going to be done until they're long past the use of these substances.
Great. Dr. Fagan, let's bring you back in. Can the use of e-cigarettes lead to subsequent use of other tobacco products, cigarettes and others?
Yeah, that's a great question. We have found through a number of different studies that have been conducted across the nation that e-cigarette use has led to the uptake of cigarettes among adolescents and young adults, and vice versa. Studies also show that those adolescents who initiate with a cigarette are also at increased risk for using e-cigarettes. So we see that e-cigarettes are a gateway drug for cigarettes and vice versa. And I think the biggest thing that we should be concerned about is these are all tobacco products and they all contain nicotine, and nicotine is highly addictive.
Great, thank you. I'm going to shift just a little bit because many of the lung conditions that have been reported have also been associated with marijuana use or THC additions to the vaporized products. You know, a vape product is nothing but basically like your coffee maker. You boil stuff until it makes vapor and you breathe it in. The Juul pod itself can be manipulated to have other things added to it, and many of the other devices are built to have multiple things added to it. How does THC and nicotine together affect the body when used in combination?
Sure, I think unfortunately we are seeing not only lots of Juul standard liquid, Juul nicotine-based liquid, but I think we also see really on a daily basis in the emergency department marijuana use, and specifically now this vape cartridge, the black market THC oil. And again, for some of the same reasons that cigarettes are a little bit stigmatized, that your breath smells and they make your clothes stink and whatnot, that marijuana has been stigmatized in the same way by smoking marijuana. Now that stigma is somewhat removed, the same way it is with vape cartridges, the same way people using THC cartridges. Unfortunately, there is no regulation. We don't know what's in these cartridges. We don't know, again, as Dr. Reed was saying, some of the hashish oils and then some of the carrier oils that are being used that can cause lung injury. In terms of using the two in combination, again, it's really just an additive effect there. You get the stimulant, the stimulation from using the nicotine that kind of turns everything up in your body. And THC has the potential to exacerbate that.
We'll talk in a little bit about marijuana here in our state from a medical perspective, but one of the things that I think the audience needs to recognize is your lungs are very fragile. Is a very fragile organ. There's a reason it's inside your rib cage, and you've got an air sac and you've got a blood vessel, and there's a single cell between those that exchanges oxygen one way and carbon dioxide the other. The reasons that people smoke is because they get a hit from it very fast, because it's immediately in your bloodstream. And so I think that's another aspect that makes this, unfortunately, an attractive activity for our youth. Have you guys started to see vaping-related illnesses here in Northwest Arkansas at the children's campus?
We've heard of one account potentially related, that there's a lot of extra factors in that case, but either way, whether kids are fessing up to using the vaping device or not is another issue, but we know that it's happening in all the high schools in our area. So even if we're not accounting it to vaping, we know that one, we're probably going to start seeing it more often, and two, as kids start to become a little bit more forthcoming about their vaping use, we may actually be able to identify that some of these breathing issues and lung issues that we've been seeing in our patients might be related to the vaping devices.
I think to speak a little bit to what Attorney General Rutledge had alluded to earlier, there is still a lot of educational misconception between both parents and kids. Anecdotally, I see lots of parents who come in who are using a vaping product, so when their child is using it, their teenager is using it, they assume that it is safe. They say, well, Mom, I use it, so I figure it's better than cigarettes. And anecdotally, where I see that, it is in the emergency department, kind of twofold. We probably don't see as many kids who are admitting to cigarette smoking, but certainly an uptick in kids who are vaping. And we are seeing an exacerbation of respiratory illness. So the same way with a child who smokes cigarettes, who is an asthmatic, for example, that is prone to reactive lung disease and having to use their medicine, and that there is a direct correlation. If you're going to smoke, you're going to exacerbate your asthma. And we are seeing the same thing with dual use and with vaping. Those same children, that population that are coming in with an increase in their respiratory disease, their asthma, that is likely related to their juuling. But again, on an educational standpoint, when you ask them or ask their parents, they say, well, we didn't know this was bad. We thought this was better than cigarettes. So I think there's a great need for education within our state.
Dr. Reed, have we changed the questions in our well child visits, or even in children that are hospitalized for another condition, to ask more about the potential for vaping?
So I am on the inpatient side, so I'm in the hospital more, so I can't really speak to the outpatient clinic side, but I would assume, knowing the physicians at our hospital, they are for sure asking now, especially when a kid comes in with any kind of respiratory symptoms, or even the vomiting and nausea kind of aspect of things. I know from my standpoint, if I have a kid that's older, that's coming in with, a respiratory condition and there's no obvious cause, then I'm definitely asking. And I try to get on their side, try to get them to be honest with me, which is a whole other challenge in our teenage population. But I think the more that we can educate people that this is a danger, then, the more forthcoming they'll be about it.
Dr. Fagan, let's bring you back in. Can you help us with the protocol to actually classify a case as a vaping illness? This is a new emergence. We haven't seen it before. The CDC is doing active investigations. What would be the protocol to say, yes, this looks like a vaping-related illness?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I think the CDC is still trying to figure that out as we go along and as more cases emerge. As you mentioned earlier, we're up to 1,000 cases, and one of the things that we have to do is retrospectively go back and ask what types of substances the patients actually were using. And so asking questions such as, do you vape? Do you vape liquids that have nicotine in them? Do you vape liquids that have THC in them? What is the frequency of the use of these products? And then go back and look at their medical history as well to determine whether or not they had reported symptoms earlier to a physician, or did they have symptoms that they experienced and never reported to anyone. And so we have to learn more about their medical history as well as their use of vaping product history in order to determine whether or not the case gets classified. But I still think the CDC is still trying to determine what that protocol really looks like, because this is such a mysterious disease that we're seeing in young people and in young adults.
This is really a new condition. The CDC has opened their emergency operations center to try to actually optimize, and I know Dr. Fagan and others at the College of Public Health will be thinking about how to use the public health strategies and epidemiology to try to understand better about what's going on.
If I could, a little bit from a clinical standpoint, in my understanding with the vaping-associated lung injury cases that we're seeing, there are patients who seek medical care for cough, for shortness of breath, for difficulty breathing, almost similar to what a congestive heart failure patient or a pneumonia patient would look like. Those patients, when they present for care, sometimes will have radiographic changes on an x-ray, sometimes will be hypoxic where they're not getting enough oxygen in their bloodstream, so are having difficulty breathing from that standpoint. A lot of them don't necessarily have changes on their x-ray, but you can see smaller changes on a CT scan. So the patients who are profoundly ill that wind up having to have ventilatory support on a breathing tube, on a ventilator, some of the protocols are being developed to do CT scans to be able to look further at their lung tissue, or even doing some suction kind of biopsies from their endotracheal tube, looking for either certain substances, certain bacteria, or certain inflammatory markers. So in the intensive care unit, to actually be able to take either a sputum or a secretion sample. But again, you have to have the suspicion that this is related somehow to their vaping history or their THC use.
And I think what we're learning from the CDC is kind of two different types of presentations too. There's a very acute onset of the lung problems, maybe related to a toxic substance or else, and then there's a chronic over weeks presentation with a cough or dyspnea, difficulty breathing, that represents maybe a more chronic exposure coming forward. So what should parents watch for in their teen if they suspect vaping activities?
So first off, I've had parents tell me that they keep catching an aroma that smells very nice, but they can't figure out where it's coming from. That's one of the most common things I've heard from some of the parents that we found later that the teenagers were vaping. If you're getting orders to your house that you didn't order, because this is how we're, especially in Arkansas, where it is legal to be, transporting it into our state, they're ordering it online, and a lot of times often under the parent's own account, and so things are getting ordered and arriving to the house before the parents even know about it. Also, just symptomatically, it's a substance abuse, it's nicotine, so there can be some behavioral changes to different friend groups, isolating themselves more, not being as open with you about things. And then as far as like symptoms go, if there's cough, if there's any respiratory illness, and you've suspected it, you need to have that kind of high up in your mind that maybe there's something going on in your home. The other thing is that they showed pictures earlier in that video of the various devices. They can look like common household items, and so if your teenager's carrying around something that doesn't seem like something they should be carrying around all the time, like a SHARPIE or a USB drive, you might start asking a few questions about why do you need a SHARPIE all the time? Why do you need a USB drive all the time?
I actually tell my friends, if you've got a teenager, there's a 20% chance that they are actively vaping now. If you got 5 teenagers over, 1 out of 5 is there. And so just have the conversation. Don't wait until you confirm, assume that there is knowledge and exposure and potential use.
Say that, and again, I think for all of you who are educators, we as general pediatricians are educators as well, and teenagers are smarter than we give them credit for sometimes. So one, they're sneaky, so sometimes it's hard to be able to find that out. But a lot of them, if we develop relationships and can talk about things like nicotine use and caffeine use and good sleep hygiene and all the things that we would hope as parents and educators we're addressing with them, they'll be pretty open about what they're doing or why they're doing it, and are sometimes even receptive to some of the facts and some of the education that we're trying to disseminate about really these things aren't good for your brain. While you may get a temporary high, a temporary boost, you will have a decline in your sleep function, you'll have a decline in your athletic function. It will take more and more to get that same degree of concentration while you're studying. So again, prevention, to my mind, really being able to have those discussions ahead of time, or if you do have a teen who's vaping, to be open and forthright with the discussion.
I think also one of the things we learned with cigarettes is youth can be very strongly activated when they understand the corporate interest in addicting them for a product to become a lifelong user. The Truth campaign was some of the strongest messaging, and it didn't come from folks like us. It came from the teens themselves pushing back against the corporation. Dr. Fagan, let's bring you back. There's a lot of talk on the news about vaping. Is this increase associated illness due to new awareness, or is this the start of an outbreak, or how does this pattern mirror other emerging conditions as we first discovered them?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. If we think back to the HIV epidemic, once CDC started reporting those first cases of HIV-related illnesses, then other people started coming forward and reporting them as they recognized some of those symptoms. And so we're seeing a bit of that here as well. The more cases that get reported, the more cases get uncovered. We know these products have been on the market since 2011. And as you mentioned earlier, about 36% of the cases report exclusive use of THC. 16% of the cases are reporting exclusive use of nicotine, but the bulk of the reported cases are reporting the use of nicotine and THC. So we don't want to lose sight of that, but certainly as more people report these cases, the more cases will come forward and get revealed throughout all of the states.
And you just mentioned, obviously, the use, or at least combination use, which is not as e-cigarettes, or at least advertised for their intent. I mean, are they still as dangerous if they're used as intended, or just when they're modified or combined with other products?
Yeah, so that's a great question as well. And so one of the things that we've looked at is what we call unorthodox use or orthodox use, using the product as intended by the manufacturer. Most people use it in an unorthodox way. 2 years ago we were looking at the behavior of dripping, cloud chasing, steeping, streeping. Those are all different ways in which people use the product. We know that they add other things to the products. People add coffee, people add alcohol, people add sugars that are already in there. People add THC, as you know. And so there are a lot of unorthodox use behaviors that are going on. And as you mentioned earlier, none of it's regulated. So whether or not you're buying it in a retail shop from a manufacturer who has his or her own recipe versus someone in the neighborhood who has their recipe that they share online, it's not regulated. There are no product standards. And so we should be concerned about all products that are on the market, not just those that are being sold by neighbors.
You just rostered several. Is there actually a list of what things are that people are adding to these devices and putting into their lungs?
Well, if you go into any e-cigarette forum, there are about 90 US-based ones that we're following right now, but if you go into any of those forums and you go under do it yourself, you can see all the different kinds of chemicals that are being added to these particular products. The basic things that we know of are propylene glycol, vegetable glycerin, nicotine, and those flavorants which are highly attract children to use the product. So that's what we're most familiar with. But certainly there are a host of other chemicals that are being added by users, and these e-cigarette forums have thousands of people who are following this information on the internet.
Well, and I come back as a fellow pediatrician with my stage mates here. The only thing that should go in your lungs is air. I mean, this is really not rocket science, but people seem to be able to try anything along these lines, and it's really, it doesn't make sense.
To dovetail on something that Dr. Fagan just said, in terms of intention of Juul and the other vaping companies, they will tell you, no, we're not targeting children. There's no targeted campaign. Let's be honest. Let's just put it out there. They're making flavors like bubblegum and cream and mint chocolate, things that an adult smoker is not necessarily going to be interested in. The honest truth is these companies know if they can get the teenager or the younger adolescent addicted to nicotine, they're going to be addicted to that substance, whether in a vaping form or in a cigarette form, and they're going to have customers for life. So the honesty component about whether it's an orthodox use or an unorthodox use, the intention of these companies is to create addicts and to create lifelong customers.
If I could just add, I think we had literally decades of misinformation, disinformation from the tobacco industry as evidence built. And we hear this argument that there's no evidence that this causes harm. And I go back, well, it rationally should cause harm. So how should we actually build that evidence base going forward? And I think we're going to get thrown a curveball too, as people look for a specific substance, an oil or a topic. I think it's the device itself and the delivery mechanism that enables all of these different things to be experimented with that will cause harm. So I really do think the message is it's the device, not the liquid, not the oil, not the container. It's the device that's the vector. So I think that's important. So do you have tips for how to talk to parents? I mean, I would say talk to every parent, or every parent talk to every child. But tips from an advisory perspective.
Yeah, so are you asking for like when they talk to their own teenagers? Yeah. So I actually get asked this question almost daily. So first off, I always tell parents, get educated yourself. So your kids will know some aspect about vaping, even if they're not vaping themselves. But like we said, up to almost 40% of high schoolers admitted to vaping at least once. So you need to be educated in order to have an educated conversation with your children. And there's amazing websites online, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, the American Academy of Pediatrics. Honestly, just Googling, looking for facts on vaping and vaping safety, you can learn a ton just about vaping devices, what kind of things go in vaping devices, and what to look for in your child as far as whether they're using or not. Once you're educated, then I just tell parents to use the surroundings around you to bring it up, because they're just people. I know that they're, sometimes can be a little resistant to talking to their parents about things, but it's all over the media right now. You can walk down the street and see an adult or another teenager vaping. I say use those opportunities. Oh, what is that? Oh, that's a vaping device. Do you know what that is? Do you know what's in the vaping device? Have you ever tried it? Have your kids ever, have your friends ever tried it? Then that just opens up the discussion. If you can just have a very open discussion with your teenager, then you may be able to actually have a good conversation about what it is, the risks that you're taking by doing those devices and using the vapors that they're using in those vaping devices. So,
great. Dr. Fagan, let's bring you back. What do we know about secondhand smoke or vape related to e-cigarette use?
Yeah, so we talk about the liquid that's released being an aerosol, and we call it an aerosol because it contains small particulate matter in it. We know that the aerosol includes things such as cocaine, which is one of the metabolites of nicotine. When nicotine breaks down, it breaks down into what we call cocaine. We know that is in the aerosol. We also know things such as formaldehyde is in the aerosol as well. And so, you know, if I were someone, I would not want anyone else blowing the aerosol in my face so that I could be exposed to those harmful constituents. While it smells good, the watermelon smell, the bubblegum smell is just delightful. Who would want those kind of chemicals blown in their face? So I do think we need to take into consideration what our thoughts are around making sure that we reduce exposure, not just to cigarette smoke, but to the aerosol that comes out of an e-cigarette as well. Certainly, children should not be exposed to those harmful chemicals. Adults who are using it around their children in the home are establishing social norms that make them think that that behavior has been normalized. And certainly, we don't want babies exposed to that type of aerosol.
So I'm going to hold you with us here for a second, Pebbles, but I want to touch on just a second the corporate strategy of tobacco, nicotine delivering organizations, privately held companies like Juul. You know, the long history of corporate tobacco having strong ability to get people addicted to become lifelong consumers, we've been fighting that battle now for decades. Arkansans continue to use tobacco at an extremely high rate. 1 in 4 Arkansans use tobacco products. It's the #1 cause of death in our state, and yet we continue to have to educate and try to get people not addicted and off of those products. What's come along now is a rapid invasion of a new electronic product that is, in 10 years, become current user of 1 in 5 of our teenagers and will become that going forward. There's yet another wave of product called a new tech cigarette that heats tobacco. It doesn't burn tobacco. It's an IQOS. Philip Morris has asked the Food and Drug Administration to classify it as a risk reduction product coming forward. So these are the new waves of this nicotine addiction strategy securing lifetime consumers. Dr. Fagan, I might just ask you from your perspective on a public health, you know, is this 3-wave approach of tobacco, vaping products, and now non-burned but heated tobacco products? What does that look like from your perspective?
Yes, and so the FDA just approved IQOS to be put on the market. This summer it came out on the market in the Atlanta area. It has been on the market in other places such as Italy, Japan, Spain, Israel, and a number of other different places. And so one of the things we should be aware of is that there were other heat not burn products on the market that didn't really catch on well. And this was prior to the e-cigarette epidemic. So now we're seeing this new product come out on the market. It looks like a miniature cigarette that is tobacco rolled paper that you put on a heat stick that Philip Morris claims does not heat past combustion, although we really don't know that to be true. But when you heat the product, it burns the tobacco, not to the point of combustion, and so that's why they claim that it is a safer product than smoking cigarettes. I think the bottom line is all of these products contain nicotine. And IQOS was released on the market in 3 different flavors: regular, menthol smooth, and menthol fresh. What we know from the history of tobacco industry is that about 40% of youth initiated cigarette smoking with a menthol flavored cigarette. Some transition to regular cigarettes, some continue to smoke menthol flavored cigarettes. So you have to ask the question, why would Philip Morris, of the 3 flavors that they would choose to release on the market, 2 menthol and 1 regular flavor? That's something that we have to think about because we know the history of tobacco industry and using menthol flavor to get young people to initiate cigarette smoking. So sometimes, you know, we have to look at our history to know exactly where we're going, and we can almost predict where this epidemic could potentially lead based upon what we already know about what tobacco industry has done.
Great. Well, as we start to wrap this up, I want to go to each of our panelists. From a health perspective, what else can we do to try to address this issue? We're trying to raise awareness, we're trying to educate. Our Attorney General, along with other Attorneys General, I'm sure will be trying to take legal action here to protect consumers. But from a health perspective, Dr. Reed, what else can you think that we should be doing now in this space?
Well, I think that anyone that has interaction with these teenagers, we need to be having open discussions about it. Like Dr. Dupuy said, there's a lot of teenagers that are incredibly intelligent. They're able to get away with a lot of stuff, but they really do care about their health when it comes down to it. And I usually try to use that angle when I talk to teenagers. I try to figure out what it is that they feel is important in their life. And so I feel like educators, physicians, nurses, or even parents, if you can find that angle and talk to them in that perspective, hey, you're an athlete, this is how it's going to affect you. Hey, you're a musician, or you want to do this with your life. It's just using that goal setting with them as a motivation to be healthy and to make good choices. I think the people that can do that the most are the ones that interact with them on a day-to-day basis. So teachers and physicians and parents. So.
Great, Dr. Dupuy.
I would agree. I think as a general principle for talking to teenagers, talk often and be repetitive. They are listening more than we think that they are. Find their talk time. For a lot of parents, that's in the car, that's before bedtime at my house. My teenage daughter will talk your ear off when she's trying not to go to sleep. So find the time to really connect in the same way that we talk about other important topics, that we talk about life and faith and sexuality and spirituality and health and all of those things. Bring it up over and over and over and ask, because they really do want our input as parents, even though they may be a little resistant or standoffish. Don't become deflated by that. Keep going at it. Keep asking.
Dr. Fagan.
I think one of the things that we can do is integrate screening for vaping into all of our clinical protocols. I think that would be a tremendous benefit to everyone, so that we're not just asking adults who use tobacco or do you vape or use smokeless tobacco. We should be asking adolescents the same thing in all of our clinical protocols, so that we can determine whether or not they are users, and then begin to have a conversation with them about the addiction and the harm that could be potentially caused by these products.
Great. I know Senator Bledsoe is here. They have other elected officials. It's a little bright up here for me to be able to see faces now. But I do think there are some policy levers. Our Center for Health Improvement focuses on both the local, state, and national policy opportunities. E-cigarettes are not part of our clean indoor air bill. It's illegal for me to smoke a cigarette. It is not illegal for me to take a drag on this here sitting in front of you now. We don't tax e-cigarettes at the same rate that we tax cigarettes, and yet this pod is equal to a full pack of cigarettes. Finally, we don't restrict advertising. There is no restriction on advertising of e-cigarettes in front of schools, near playgrounds, other activities from a legal or regulatory perspective. Now, here is my ask of you, is I need to ask you to contact your representative and your senator in our General Assembly. Because 3 years ago, the vaping industry got them to pass a law that restricts every community's option to tax, to have clean indoor air, or to restrict advertising. They preempted all local control, so that the only entity in this state now that can restrict vaping is actually the General Assembly 2 years from now. The governor has to call a special session, and they have to agree what to do because of that preemptive legislation. If you think back to cigarettes, it was local experimentation that led to the clean indoor air bill. We had a couple of communities that restricted indoor smoking of tobacco products. We had local communities that raised the purchase age of tobacco to age 21, that then led to our statewide law last year that eventually raised the purchase age to age 21 for tobacco and e-cigarettes. But we need local communities to have control. In Little Rock, where I live, in the Hillcrest, near St. Mary's, there's a pick pack right across the street from St. Mary's, 3 big neon jewel signs in the front windows. No ability of the city of Little Rock to restrict that. Now my team went and took a picture of it, and they're gone now. So there is the ability for you to also have a little local influence and threat by raising the level of awareness of parents and engaging there too. I hope this has been educational, instructive. I think it's been enjoyable for us here on the stage. I would encourage each and every one of you as a parent or a grandparent to take the opportunity as you walk down the street with your child and you see something to then start the conversation. As Dr. Dupuy says, don't have it be a single conversation, because the first time they may not listen, but the second or third time you're going to crack through and make it happen. Dr. Fagan, in the public health space, we need the epidemiology and we need the understanding of what this new and emerging illness is, but I think we hold it in our hand, and that it's the device itself that is introducing toxic substances into an organ that we are all critically dependent on to breathe oxygen in and breathe carbon dioxide out. So let me ask you to join me in thanking our panelists and letting us be a part of the Dr. Fagan, thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for lending your expertise to our summit today. We're going to play a short video and then ask Dr. Thompson to join us back on stage to discuss the toxic THC in vape pods.
This is an x-ray of a patient's lungs. And here's an x-ray of those same lungs just 5 days later. See all that light gray? That's fluid, which filled their lungs because of a life-threatening lung disease, linked to vaping. For years, vaping has been touted as a safer alternative to smoking cigarettes. But now, some vaping products are killing people. So what's going on? And is it really bad for you? Vaping typically refers to inhaling an aerosol, which contains either nicotine, in the case of e-cigarettes, or some form of cannabis, such as the psychoactive chemical THC. And in the last few years, it has exploded in popularity, especially among teens. I mean, just look at this graph. It shows the percent of high school students who use e-cigarettes. In 2018, it was over 20%. And that's what makes this news so scary.
A patient died from a severe respiratory illness, and it could be the country's first vaping-related death.
That was in August of 2019. And by early September, the number of reported deaths linked to vaping had climbed to at least 6. Not to mention, there were at least 450 possible lung injuries tied to both THC and nicotine vape pens.
I have been saying this from the beginning. Looks like it's becoming an epidemic.
That's Dr. Melody Prasada, who's treated at least 2 patients with what she calls vaping-associated lung injury.
So over here we are seeing our 18-year-old patient who, when he first presented to the emergency room with chest pain, fever, coughing, and vomiting. And as you see over here, it is the black is for the lungs, and you see nice still black.
But 5 days later, his lungs were filled with fluid because of inflammation, which she said was linked to vaping THC.
Once you come to this point, the chance of dying can be as high as 70%.
So what's causing all that inflammation, all of these lung injuries? The short answer is, we don't really know. Doctors say it's likely not the nicotine or THC itself, but rather other chemicals inside the liquid which get vaporized when you inhale. One possible culprit is vitamin E acetate, which health officials have found inside many vape pens that have been linked to the recent string of lung injuries.
When you start inhaling oils, any type of oil, vitamin E is an oil. Any type of oil, if you start to inhale to your lungs, you are going to create problem inside your alveoli.
Alveoli are small bubbles inside your lungs that transfer oxygen to your blood. And she says that vitamin E could interfere with the lining that surrounds them called pulmonary surfactant. But according to Dr. Mikhail Kazachkov,
I don't think vitamin E is the only guilty, substance here.
Because when it comes to vape pens,
you're going to inhale dozens of other substances, which are not necessarily advertised, but they are there. There definitely needs to be a carrier, vehicle, because nicotine cannot be delivered just in a pure form.
Until researchers find out what's behind vaping-associated lung injuries, the CDC says don't vape. But here's the thing. Lung injuries, they're actually not the only risk associated with vaping. One small study, for example, found that kids who used e-cigarettes might be exposed to higher levels of nicotine than those who used traditional cigarettes.
It would not be unusual to have extremely extraordinarily high concentration of nicotine in vape.
And
nicotine is not benign.
It raises your blood pressure, which can increase the risk of having a heart attack. And if you're a teen,
it is known to cause problems with the brain development.
Not to mention, it's highly addictive. Now you might be thinking, well, isn't vaping still better for you than smoking? But the answer isn't so simple. You see, smoking is really bad. It kills more than 480,000 Americans each year. And vaporizers, they typically contain fewer toxic chemicals than the 7,000 or so found in cigarettes. But at least in the short term,
there's absolutely no reason to say that vaping is healthier than smoking. In my opinion, vaping is worse because we're scared. We don't know what to do.
So if nothing else, there's probably a better alternative to smoking than vaping. And if you're not already a smoker, you definitely should not start vaping now.
It is at this point very clear that vaping is not only unhealthy, but it is very dangerous. This is not anymore a debate. This is a proven fact that vaping is killing people.
So that was a video of Kurt Lane, the state's drug czar, that you wanted to make sure, the Attorney General wanted to make sure that you saw. You're seeing a number of resources that I hope you will find ways to make them available to you in multiple different ways and venues. The Attorney General's team asked me to say a few things about marijuana and its presence both within our state and within our schools. We, as you know, as a state, voted 3 years ago to enable medical marijuana to be available. And we now have, we will have 5 growers and 50 some odd retailers across the state making that present. It's under a fairly restrictive growth pattern so that it is followed from seed to sale. So I think some of the toxic exposures, we may be able to prevent them. But it has been introduced into our healthcare delivery system. We've had questions about, well, how does a hospital manage a patient now if they come in on medical marijuana? Because marijuana is still federally illegal, and I don't know of any hospital that doesn't take Medicare as a federal funding source. So the hospital can't dispense the marijuana. Do you want the patient having the marijuana in the patient's room? We don't let them smoke. Are we going to allow smoking? All these are issues that are unfolding. I think as it's important for this conference, I think much of the toxicity that has been reported by the combined use is probably not from medical grade marijuana that has been grown in a more restrictive effort. It's from the black market marijuana, street marijuana, some that may be grown locally, much of which is imported from other sources. Increasingly, we are seeing it not be pure marijuana, but that it is also combined with other drugs, and specifically heroin and fentanyl, that an unknown or an unwitting consumption of can actually cause and has caused respiratory arrest and the requirement for Narcan and other uses there. With respect to our student population, Arkansas data, we know that 14% of Arkansas high school students have used marijuana in the last 30 days. So that's 1 in 7. This is not dissimilar to the 20% that are current vape users. And so I really do think as educators, as physicians, as parents, as community leaders, we need to step forward to try to protect our youth from exposure, from addiction, and from downstream harm. The video you just saw kind of characterized what's different between a cigarette and a vaping device. And I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit without evidence that has been built, but to predict what I think is going to be found. When you burn tobacco, it makes carcinogenic agents that you breathe into your lung, and over time, it causes cancer. causes cancer in your lung, it causes cancers in other parts of your body. Bladder cancer is almost always associated with tobacco use because the carcinogens get concentrated through your kidneys to excrete. I think, and it's alluded, the picture of your alveoli, your air sac, right up against a blood vessel with only a single cell between the two. If you're vaporizing any product, smoking any product, and you're inflaming that single cell, and it gets thicker because it's been irritated, that's what's leading to these lung conditions. And there may be some toxicity. If it's an oil-based product, it's going to happen faster. But any product in that space that is intended to be your oxygen exchange with the outside world is a major challenge. I think medical marijuana has been a gateway. When it first passed, I went out to Colorado to talk to, actually Colorado has they have a marijuana czar. I went out to Colorado to talk to the marijuana czar with a single question. How do you keep a state that has passed medical marijuana from passing it to allow recreational marijuana? And he had an interesting response, a concerning response to me, and I want to share it with you because I don't want to be the only one with this concern. I want you to all have this concern too. He said it's not about medical or recreation. It's about whether you have commercial interests that are going to push marijuana. If you have commercial growers, if you have commercial sellers, if your state is basing a tax revenue stream off of marijuana, you will end up with recreational marijuana because the interests, political, financial, corporate, will overcome resistance. We have 12 months, maybe, less so. There's an active petition to have recreational marijuana on our next ballot initiative. So I think there is a real choice that is before us as a state and as voters and citizens of whether we want to have the corporate, political, economic interests overcome what I think we all probably know is the right answer for this. And it definitely is an exposure that we need to protect our kids from. So, General Rutledge, thank you for letting us be part of your time here today. We stand ready as both health and community leaders to help in any way that we can and look forward to fighting this fight with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. We're going to take about a 10-minute break before we introduce our next panel. Please enjoy the refreshments that are located in the lobby. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with our final panel for the afternoon. Vaping solutions from the schoolhouse to the state house. And before I do introductions, I'm going to take a moment to brag on my boss a little bit because I'm pretty sure she's not going to do it herself. We had the honor yesterday of taking a call from the U.S. Surgeon General. And during the course of the conversation, he emphasized very much how much of an epidemic vaping is with our youth population. And he wanted to make it very clear that he applauded the efforts of the Attorney General's office and the community that we have surrounded ourselves with to educate our teens and parents on this issue. I would be remiss to say as well that he gave another shout out to our representatives for passing the T21 bill this last session, which raised the age for purchase of tobacco products and e-cigarette products to 21, which has a known correlation to reducing smoking and tobacco use amongst the youth. With that, our next panel includes the Attorney General, who will moderate the session. We have with us Representative Dr. Lee Johnson. Dr. Johnson is in his first term in the Arkansas House of Representatives. He represents District 75 and serves on the House Public Health, Welfare, and Labor Committee, as well as the House City, County, Local Affairs Committee. Chris Hutchins is the Athletic Director here at Bentonville High School. He has served in Bentonville schools for 22 years, most recently as Bentonville High School Dean of Students and Assistant Football Coach. Officer John Loncarvac, I think I got that right, is a native of Davison, Michigan. He is a former United States Marine Corpsman. After his enlistment, he began his law enforcement career in Mississippi in 2004, where he worked with the narcotics team and promoted to the rank of corporal and shift commander. He was the recipient of the Policeman of the Year in 2006. In 2007, he took a position with the Bentonville Police Department, and in 2014 became the school resource officer to work at Bentonville High School, where he is currently assigned. Finally, we have Deputy Attorney General Chuck Harder. Chuck is the Deputy Attorney General for our Public Protection Division, which consists of 4 divisions. Consumer Protection, which fights deceptive trade practices, mediates disputes between consumers and businesses, and oversees charities registrations. Consumer Utilities Rate Advocacy, Environmental, and Tobacco, which administrates the Tobacco Master Settlement Agreement. And with that, I'll turn it over to the Attorney General.
All right. Make sure this mic is on. There it is. Fantastic. Well, let's give Brian, our moderator, a round of applause. He's been doing a great job today. Brian serves as Deputy Chief of Staff and Legislative Director. He works at the Capitol when legislators are in session and year-round to make sure that the Attorney General's office is able to do what we can to help out our lawmakers throughout the year. And so we really appreciate him stepping up today and helping corral all these cats on stage and to make sure we all stay in line and on time. Well, this panel, as Brian mentioned, is to talk about solutions and issues that we're seeing from our schoolhouses to the State House. And so I'm going to begin my questions focused with our 2 school officials here, and I'm going to kick it over to you first, Officer Loncarvac, to see, we could just call him John, but it's so much fun to say that fun name because we don't get a lot of Loncarvacs here in Arkansas. That's definitely a Michigan name. So I want to talk to you, Officer, about you have probably seen a dramatic increase in youths using e-cigarettes and vaping on campuses. What age groups are being affected? Where all have you seen it the most, and what has been probably the most shocking? How young are we talking about?
I would say there's obviously definitely an increase. 5 years ago when I started here, it was all about, we had a smoking bridge. We'd catch them out there every morning smoking. Now they're all transitioning to vaping. All the way down to, from obviously seniors, 17, 18, all the way down to 13, 14 in our junior highs. We've caught them on the buses, they get reported there. So it's just a major increase into it. But most of them are, when you do catch them, they have products that say may contain nicotine. And so to them, they feel like, oh, it doesn't have nicotine, it's safe, it's this, it's that. So we're catching them through all age groups.
Well, that was going to be my question, my follow-up question, Officer, is that do these kids know that it contains nicotine or chemicals, or do they think it just contains flavored water, like they're getting a peach water from Sonic between 2 and 4 or whatever the happy hour is at Sonic? I used to be cool, I'm not now.
They think it's safe. I mean, that is the key to it is they're reading, there's nothing on these bottles, there's nothing saying what's in them, but they're getting the information that's getting passed on from team to team that, not really doing any research on it. They just, my buddy said this is safe, it doesn't have any nicotine in it. They have no concerns, no regard for it. They believe it's just, flavored water, flavored oil, that nothing's gonna hurt them.
And how are they disguising these products? We've seen some today and we've seen some in the videos, but we heard some pretty shocking stories, if you will, from a school resource officer on Monday talking about where teens are hiding them
and that they're using them after they've been hidden in those places. And so are you all seeing that too, where teens are, I mean, talk to us about that. Tell us what you're seeing, because those of us who have been prosecutors in law enforcement, we hear these sort of stories, but I think it's important for everyone to hear these sort of stories, and particularly for teenagers to hear these stories, and for parents.
We have definitely found them in some interesting places. Places that you definitely want to share with your buddy.
And so I'm going to clear that up. So these kids are in the bathroom.
Yes.
And they are putting the vapes in parts of their body.
Yes.
And hiding them and pulling the vapes out of those parts and using vapes.
Yes, they are. I mean, they're hiding.
Is that accurate, officer?
It is. It is. They're down in their underwear, and they're just. I mean, their buddies are in the bathroom. They know where they're getting it from, and they continue to share it in the bathroom. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, when we speak to them afterwards, you know, they get caught, and I'm like, "You do know your buddy had that, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." It doesn't bother you? No. Okay. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to get through with something like that, but I mean, we find them hiding it inside of ink pens. We've had them, you know, obviously when the Juul first came on the market, they were disguised with USB ports and stuff like that. So I mean, I've seen the ones they can purchase that look like ink. I mean, they legitimately look like ink pens. One had one that it actually wrote. So if you clicked on it, it worked as an ink pen.
That's, you know, I've had the opportunity to tour the Spy Museum in Washington, D.C., and some of the products that these kids are using could easily be in the Spy Museum.
Oh, absolutely.
They're doing that to ingest these e-cigarettes and vapes. I'm going to swing over here to you, Mr. Hutchins, because you are, in addition to your other responsibilities, with the athletic director and dealing with our young athletes who are so talented. Are your athletes vaping?
Oh, unfortunately, everyone is vaping. It's an interesting set of conversation. It's not just one social group or one set of kids or these kids that live in this neighborhood or this neighborhood. It's kind of everybody has taken this epidemic, and so it's hit athletes, non-athletes. It's something that's hit everyone.
And as coaches and others are talking to these kids about it impacting their athletic ability, when you're talking about whether it's a football player running down the field or a gymnast, a tennis player, what are the students' reaction? Do they have and we've all been teenagers, we've all been invincible, as most teens are. Are they sort of, that's not going to happen to me?
I think in our community, it's started to turn just a little bit because we have started hitting it so hard. From the beginning of the year last year when I had a different role as a dean of students all the way to this year, just the knowledge that our staff has about the products that we've gotten from all resources in Arkansas and locally. Education obviously is going to change things dramatically, and we've started that process, but they're still trying it. They're still kids, and they're still going to take those opportunities. It's, you know, early in the season, it's so hot during the games. I'm talking Friday night football, and our coaches do such a great job of talking to kids about hydrating themselves and making sure you start that process early. And then our second game here at Tiger Stadium, we had more cramps than I've ever seen ever. I've been in Bentonville for 22 years at Friday night football, a lot of football games, and we had kids cramping, and it's like, I wonder what those kids are doing to their bodies. Are they vaping? Are they doing other things besides what they should be doing? Is there some type of correlation on what the performance is? So it's an ongoing issue. It's not going to be solved quickly, but it is something that affects athletes.
And what about the school policies? If a child is caught with a vape at school or caught using e-cigarettes, what's the school policy, and are you getting pushback from parents?
Parents, as my role as Dean of Students last year at Bentonville High School, and then as athletic director now, parents are supportive. They see that kids are dying vaping. They see that in the news. They see how it's affecting communities. But yeah, our policies this year are different than they were last year. Last year was kind of okay, you vaped and you get this day of in school, and the next time you do it, you get this day of in school. But now our policies as far as on campus are progressive. So you're getting 3 days of in-school suspension, and the next time if you're caught, you're getting 4 days of in-school suspension, and you can be suspended or given a change of placement with enough times being caught with a vape. As far as athletics in our community, we have an athletic code book, and we have different levels, level 1 through level 4. And vaping, or if you're caught with a vape, it's a level 2 infraction, which is a 5-day suspension, up to a 5-day suspension. You can miss games, you're gonna get extra conditioning, and in our handbook, a level 2 infraction, the head coach is gonna meet with the family, the athletic director is gonna meet with the family, so the policies have changed because of what we've seen.
And officer, are you having that, are officers throughout the campus having that same interaction with parents? Because I've heard from a number of school resource officers as well as school personnel who've said they've had parents, unfortunately, who have not been as positive and have not been as pleased to see the school taking action. Matter of fact, just the opposite, where they're almost in dismay that the school will be like, are you kidding me? You know, of all the bad things my kid could be doing, you're worried about vaping? Or that's my vape. I gave that to my son, or I gave that to my daughter. I don't care if they use it. You know, give that back to me.
Yes, I mean, we have a lot of parents that are supportive, but I've had a lot of times of parents not concerned that the kid got caught. The kid's gonna get a couple of, my students get a couple of days of ISS, but that's my baby. They took it from me. When can I come up and get it? We've had numerous ones say that they have bought it for their child. 15-year-old, 16-year-old child, with the misconception that what the oil that they're providing, or the juice, as they call it, they're providing it does not contain nicotine. So they're not always, we have a lot of strong parent support, don't get me wrong, but we do have a lot who they're more upset they got caught, they're more upset they want their vape back. They're really upset when I don't give it back to them. And they feel like we need to, again, a lot of the common reaction to law enforcement, you need to be doing this. You should be worrying about something else. You need to be patrolling, you need to be whatever. But they're downgrading the fact that their student is missing class in a bathroom with a group of kids vaping. And that is not their concern.
And I think that just highlights the point that we have to educate adults about these dangers and the problem as much as we do the young people. So I'm going to switch gears over here to our resident doctor / legislator. And so thank you, Dr. Johnson, for joining us again today. And during the legislative session earlier this year, a number of items were brought up. And again, we applaud you and thank the legislature so much for passing the law raising the age to 21 over time to purchase tobacco products. However, it seems as though as a state and as a country that the concerns surrounding e-cigarettes and vaping did not hit a fever pitch until after the legislative session. And so talk to us about, as a doctor, but also as a legislator, about what you would like for people, bring information to you, and what you've seen in your own practice.
Sure, absolutely. First of all, kudos to whoever put on this format. I feel like I'm on Ellen DeGeneres. This is great.
Well, we're all friends here.
That's perfect.
So
I love it. I love it. Much more at ease.
I would love to sit between President Bush and Ellen DeGeneres.
That's perfect.
I mean, two of the funniest people.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, as a physician, it's much easier to sit here as a physician and tout the dangers of vape. I sat through Dr. Thompson and his panel, and it's easy for me from a physician standpoint to say, look, this is a bad product. This is bad for you. This is dangerous to be doing. On the video, I think the fact that the pulmonologist, the pediatric pulmonologist pointed out this is maybe more dangerous than smoking, because while long term, all of us clearly understand the dangers of smoking, very few people are dropping over immediately dead when smoking cigarettes. But with these vaping products, we have no idea what they're putting in their lungs. We really have no idea what's causing this lung issue. So from a physician standpoint, it's easy to tout that. As a legislator, the challenges I'm finding are a little more difficult. The first step to generating legislative change, which clearly we need, is raising public awareness. And so I think this event today, having this crowd here today, is the first step to initiating legislative change. Legislators have to want and understand that there needs to be change, and that's driven by their constituents. And so I want to thank you for taking the time to put this on today, and thank all of you for being here today. As far as legislative solutions, I kind of divide those up in my head. I try to be organized in how I think about them. I think I said I had 3 categories the other day. I thought of maybe a 4th, but the first category I think of with legislative solutions is preventing the initiation by our youth of starting to begin with, right? And so for me, part of that is we have to get out there and ban these flavors. I mean, that has to stop. That we can't have flavored products. That's strictly geared to trying to get an entry-level audience in, whether it's sweet cereal flavored or cotton candy flavor or whatever the flavor may be. We also have to work towards stopping and preventing the ads geared toward our kids, the same way we do with the cigarettes and tobacco products. We need to do the best we can to try to take steps to prevent those ads from being out there where children can look at them and see them. And then a key component too is education. We have to do the things that we need to do to educate our youth that this is dangerous. I think back to my 5th grade year, and there was a campaign back then to really, tout the dangers of tobacco. And I can remember my 5th grade teacher, Mrs. Fields, coming in with this lung that had been, a tobacco lung, and it was black and tarry, and the vision and image of that as a 5th grader really stuck in my head. And to this day, when I see someone smoking, I think about that image. And we need to do things legislatively to support education in our schools at an early age. As you mentioned, we're seeing this at 13, 12. By that time, it's too late. We need to let our children understand that this is dangerous. This can kill you, and get that message out early. I think preventing accessibility is another category, which I appreciate your comments on Tobacco 21. I'm real proud of that piece of legislation. I'm proud that we as a state were able to get that accomplished. That's been proven to be a very effective method in limiting access to youth by raising the age to 21. Very few 13-year-olds know 21-year-olds that can purchase tobacco for them, but they do know 18-year-olds. So I'm grateful for that. I think the other thing that's really sensitive to, the youth are really sensitive to, is price point. So as you raise the price point of these products, it limits their ability to purchase them. And so we need to do some things with the tax. Right now, I think it was mentioned that it's not taxed like other tobacco products. The truth is it's not taxed at all. There's no tax at all on e-cigarettes in our state. There's only a handful of states across the nation which currently tax e-cigarette products. And if we're going to say as a society that we should be taxing tobacco products, then we should also be taxing e-cigarette products. And so I think it's important for us as a legislator to step up and tax e-cigarettes the right way. I think it's important for us to support our enforcement officers. That's the other thing I thought of after our last session. I think anything we can do as a legislative body to tighten up the fines for people that are selling these to our youth, the challenge of trying to limit how things are sold over the black market and how they're coming into our state, I think that's important. And then finally, I think it's important not to lose sight of cessation. It's easy for us to look at an 18-year-old who's vaping, who may have been vaping for 2 years, and say quit. These guys are addicts. They're addicted to this nicotine. As a youth, as a physician, I can tell you that science will tell us the way we become addicted is by forming nicotine receptors in our brain. All of us have a certain number of those. You continue to form more of those up until about the age of 25. And so when we're exposing 13, 14-year-old kids to nicotine, physiologically, they're producing more nicotine receptors in response to the nicotine they're seeing. So they're more likely to become addicted than the 40-year-old that just starts up. And so this is a real problem for our youth as well. We need to be sympathetic and empathetic with the idea that these guys are addicts too to this nicotine. And so whatever we can do as a legislative body to support cessation, I think we ought to be looking at that as well.
so many great points there, and I think, one thing that I heard on Monday, and I'm hearing even today, is it's important for young people to hear and understand the dangers, but these 13-year-olds are victims of this advertising campaign, and they are victims of people looking to make a lot of money from them being lifelong addicts to these products. And so I think as we are talking to kids, we need to be mindful of that. These two are experts at talking to kids. Talking to teenagers is my second most difficult audience, only behind cops. Even as the Attorney General, cops are a tough audience. But they're one of my favorite, but they're still a tough audience. And so talking to kids and making sure that, we're not just, no, this is bad for you. My daughter, one of her grandmothers, we call her Noni because my husband's Italian, and Noni is 88, and Noni says no a lot. No. And so my daughter calls, instead of Noni, she calls her no. And so kids at every age, whether it's 15 months or 15 years, they hear us all saying no. But making sure that we understand that they are victims of this advertising campaign. As a legislator, and I know that we had Senator Bledsoe here, and I see Representative Harlan Breaux. I appreciate you all being here very much. We invited all members of the legislature to Monday's summit, to this summit, because this is an opportunity for all of us to learn. This is focused on preteens and teens, but it's an opportunity for all of us to learn. But throwing your legislator hat on for a moment, Doctor, what can we do? How can parents and teachers get more involved? And as a legislator, you want their opinion.
No, it's a great comment. I try to say this to all audiences. I mentioned this the other day. Anytime I'm in front of a crowd of people since I've been elected, I think it's real important that the constituents, that the citizens of our state understand how accessible our government is. Until I took office as my first term, I had really no legitimate idea of how things worked. I had sort of a passive idea from 8th grade civics, but other than that, I was pretty much rolled up in my own life. And how do bills even start? How do you even decide to pass a law? And in general, I will tell you there are 3 different ways that we receive bills. There are agencies and interest groups who bring you a bill. There are ideas that you have of your own. You come up with an idea and you think, hey, this is a great idea. But as we mentioned, my ideas are somewhat limited when you compare them to the audience here today and the citizenship of Arkansas as a whole. And so the third way we get bills is from ideas given directly to us from our constituents. And sometimes that's the best bills and ideas we have. And so I think it's important that everyone in here understand, as legislators, we want to hear from you and we want to hear your ideas. And you may have the next idea that's going to help solve some of this problem or some other crisis in our state. And so I would encourage you to know who your legislator is, know who your state representative, state senator is. If you have an idea, if you have a thought, share it with us. My colleagues, this is a small state. We all know each other. It's a good group of people there in Little Rock. We have 100 senators, or 100 representatives, 35 senators. They're all people just like you and me, and they'd all be happy to hear from you. So please, if you have ideas or things that you think would be good to help fight this crisis, reach out to us and let us know.
Thank you. And I think it's good for people to hear that those of us who happen to work in the capital city and happen to be there on a part-time basis as our legislators all, that we understand Little Rock doesn't have all the answers. But there's so many great things going on across the state of Arkansas. But speaking of having all the answers, I'm going to flip over here to Deputy Attorney General Chuck Harder. Chuck's going to have all the answers on what we've been doing at the Attorney General's office, what tools are in our kit to go after retailers, people that are deceiving Arkansas children and Arkansas parents.
Well, General, first, thanks for letting me have the opportunity to be on this panel, and thanks for your leadership in this area. The law in Arkansas is black and white. You cannot sell alcohol and you cannot sell tobacco to minors, period. Tobacco includes not only the tobacco product itself and the vape products, but it also includes all the component parts of it. You can't sell cigarette papers to a minor. You can't sell the cartridge, the vaping device to a minor. In Arkansas, retailers take that seriously because they can lose their license. You can lose your license to sell alcohol, or you can lose your license to sell tobacco. And you see this particularly there are some places I go to, I get carded if I want to buy a beer. They take this very seriously. The problem you run into...
Let's just all take that in for a moment.
Barely legal, right here, barely legal. And part of the problem, though, is you've got a generation that has grown up digitally. They buy things online. I can't tell you the last time my son walked into a store and bought me a Christmas gift, or it all comes in Amazon packages. And so these kids are used to buying things online, and that is where the policing gets very difficult. When you walk into a store, they're going to ask you for your ID. They're going to run your ID through a scanner that's going to verify that it's a valid ID and you are who you are. You don't have those kind of processes on some websites, and you have websites that don't put the proper controls in place to ensure that they're not selling to a minor. The process has to be something more than, are you over 19 or under 19? And so these retailers that are selling to the youth and shipping it, into Arkansas, they're violating Arkansas law, and the Attorney General's office has the ability to start enforcement actions against them. Violating that Arkansas law violates the Arkansas Deceptive Trade Practice Act, and it's up to $10,000 per violation. Fairly stiff penalties. You sell 10 devices into Arkansas, that's 10 times $10,000 the way we view it. And so we've undertaken to identify which of these online sellers there are, and on Monday your office sent out to 100 different online retailers enforcement advisories telling them they're not to sell to minors in Arkansas. They need to put in place processes that verify the identity and the age of the individual trying to buy online. They need to put processes in place where gift cards, Visa gift cards and other type gift cards aren't used to purchase the products online. They need to put processes in place that you can't buy a product with somebody else's credit card. You can't have the person it's being shipped to and the credit card be mama, daddy, or somebody else. They've got to put those processes in place. One other thing about Arkansas law, though, and it's a belts and suspenders approach to making sure kids don't get tobacco products, is it is illegal to ship tobacco products, period, into the state of Arkansas. We've reached out to those 100 companies. You shouldn't ship to anybody in the state of Arkansas, regardless of your age verification process, because it's illegal. It's that belt and suspenders approach. So we're taking that action towards the individuals that's their business. We've also, your office on Monday, you sent a letter to the president of eBay. We have found a number of online suppliers to get around the age verification process by selling their product over platforms like eBay. And we continue to look at those platforms. And we're going to reach out to those platforms like Amazon and Wish and others to remind them that they need to put the processes in place to avoid the shipment of tobacco and vape products to minors in Arkansas. And then one other thing that we are going to be seeking is not to allow bulk purchases, whether at an Arkansas retail store. 20% of the product that finds its way to minors comes from them purchasing it directly. 80% is they get it from somebody else. And so we've got to stop the bulk sales. We've got to stop the bulk sales not only at the brick and mortar stores here in Arkansas, but on online sales as well. And so that's what the enforcement actions we're taking to stop sales to minors. And then as part of a longer term enforcement, we're looking at the people that created this problem. Like the tobacco companies, the companies that produce and sell these vape products haven't been forthright in telling the public about the dangers of their product. And they're selling an addictive product. It's just in the same way the tobacco companies. And so they have to be held accountable for marketing to young people. Back in the day, it was Joe Camel. Today they use social influencers to try and encourage young people to smoke. And as you've heard from other panelists today, in flavors that kids want. If it's a smoking cessation device, a smoker's going to want to put in its mouth something that tastes like a cigarette. They don't want bubble gum or cotton candy. They want something that tastes like a cigarette. And go after the manufacturers for how they design their product. The smokers want something that looks and feels like a cigarette. They don't want a USB device, and they don't want a SHARPIE. I don't think anybody my age is going to run around, who's trying to quit smoking, is going to run around with a SHARPIE in their mouth. And so we have to go after them for those type of things. And so those are the types of enforcement actions that we're contemplating in the investigation that has to happen to hold these companies accountable for the crisis they're creating in our state and across the nation.
Well, thank you, Chuck. You and your team in our Public Protection Division have just done a remarkable job working on this, and we will be holding those folks accountable. And I think making sure that our retailers, our online retailers understand, and just so everyone's clear, it is illegal, 100% illegal to ship tobacco in the state of Arkansas. Fair? And so that's, people have to understand that. So when you have friends or family or others who are purchasing these products, they are purchasing an illegal product being shipped to them at their home. And so I also want to give a thank you to one of our local retailers for making the decision to stop selling vape products. A big thank you to Walmart, whose home office is just right up the road, to stop selling those products. Walmart is the largest retailer in the world, and so they are seen as a leader. And once Walmart made that decision, we saw others fall in line as well, and to stop selling those products, or to stop selling once their current supply is run out. And so I applaud Walmart for their leadership on that, to stop selling the products. And to move, to just give you guys, just an opportunity, I'm just going to open it up, so just whoever wants to jump in, don't be shy. Talk about what steps that we can take to bring better awareness. If you had some one or two or three things that you could say to parents. I know you've said it to the kids, but if you could say to these parents, if you could say to adults to bring awareness about this, the health risk, about it being unregulated, what would you tell them?
I would say this: last year in January, we had a staff development day here in this facility with the Bentonville High School staff. And there are 3 deans, including myself, and we did a presentation on vapes, e-cigarettes, and we had a stack that we had collected throughout the year. And we just talked about the different things and what they should look for in the classroom, or when the kids were asking to go to the restroom, things that the staff could see that the deans didn't always see, or the SROs didn't see, or our security people didn't all see. And we took the card out into the lobby here in the Arenard Center where the cookies and punch are today, and we were there for over an hour after staff development. If you know anything about teachers, staff development usually is out the door, see how quick you can get out, but they were asking questions. And they were, I think I've seen that charger in the side of the Chromebook in my own class. And just educating educators on vapes and what it looks like and what kids are using. And I think that turned a big tide here at Bentonville High School about informing them and educating them just here on campus. So it was a good start.
I would say not just the parents, reaching out to the groups. Here at Bentonville, we have tons and tons of clubs, sports, athletics. Kids listen to kids. They listen to kids a lot faster than they're going to listen to an adult. If you get kids talking about how to change the social norm, that it's not a popular thing, it's not cool. Same, we sell the cigarettes and the tobacco, with chewing tobacco and cigarettes kind of plummet here at the high school. And everybody's switching over to the Juuls and all these e-cigarettes. It's the kids doing it. It's not, I mean, there's commercials or advertisement, but it's the kids talking to kids, the kids educating kids. Reaching out to them and changing their mindset, and starting with the groups and the athletics and all the clubs we have after school.
Do you think these kids understand that it's illegal? And do they care?
They definitely understand it's illegal. I think a lot of times the game, do I get caught? what can I do to hide it? What can I do to get away with it? For a long time, we went several years, definitely being a game here. Kids trying to get away with it. We started issuing citations for them actually using e-cigarettes on campus. That kind of changed the mindset of a few of them because it took the game out of it. And so when they started getting citations and having to go to court because of the fact of using it, that was a little bit different. And I saw a little bit of change in it. They weren't quite as daring after that. So that definitely changed the mindset.
Upping the age to 21 is huge. If you think about education in the state of Arkansas, we have 18-year-olds on campus. We have some 19-year-olds on campus. We might have a 21-year-old on campus, not very many. But by upping the age to 21, that is huge for the state of Arkansas. Because now you can't have a kid with an e-cigarette in his vehicle and, well, I can have one, I can buy it, I'm 18. Well, you can't have it on campus though. So, but by making changing the age will be big as far as when you're talking about education in the state of Arkansas. So thank you for that, definitely.
Any big takeaways, Dr. Johnson or Chuck?
I've enjoyed all the panels. I've enjoyed the panels here and also the ones in Little Rock. And it's been the information from the medical community has been very enlightening. And I think Dr. Thompson said it very well. The only thing that should go in your lungs is oxygen, is air. And you should question whether or not you should be putting anything else in there. And I think parents have a responsibility. You have a lot of responsibilities as a parent. And one responsibility that you have to take seriously is find out about these products. If your kids are using them and you've heard they might be dangerous, you need to look into it. Because once you do, you'll find out they shouldn't be doing this. And you should take the steps so your children don't have access.
I think, to echo everything, everybody's made great points. I think awareness is so important, especially among the adults. I think understanding that this is not a safe product, that this is not a healthy alternative to nicotine consumption. This is dangerous, and I think it's important too. We haven't touched on it, but in this panel, but the fact that these pods can be used to consume drugs other than nicotine. And that those things can be obtained pretty readily on the black market just by getting on the internet. And I think, myself included, I have a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old, and their ability to technically navigate the internet, order things online, I think we all need to be aware. I think as adults, it's easy to lose track of how easy it is for these kids to get on the internet and order not just pods that contain nicotine, but pods that contain THC, and we know that other drugs are coming down the line. So while we're looking right now and talking about nicotine pods and THC pods, it's not too far down the road where you will be looking at opioids being used in these pods and even methamphetamines. And so just a heightened awareness of what your children are doing and the facts on the safety and the dangers of these products.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson, for bringing up that last point. On Monday, and I believe I saw him here earlier, we were joined by a special agent in charge of the Drug Enforcement Administration, and as I was talking to Justin King about this issue, he brought up how our DEA agents are beginning to see our drug dealers who are traveling out of state, oftentimes to California, to obtain illegal drugs that have been brought in mass quantities up from our southern border. And while they are picking up their shipment of methamphetamine, they are also picking up very large quantities of vape pods in terms of thousands, 50,000 pods at one time. And so we're seeing this as an economic boom for our drug dealers as well, and we're beginning to see the opioids, but more importantly, more dangerously, liquid methamphetamine and fentanyl being ingested through these pods. And our young kids, none of us know what's in these, but particularly young people do not understand and appreciate, and something as potent as fentanyl could take your life immediately. That this is not a 20-year cause, this is not a 20-month, it could be a 2-minute. So thank you for bringing that up. Well, let's give this panel a round of applause, and thank you all so much for your leadership and thoughts on this.
don't know which mic is on, so we have one on. All right, good. That's all that matters. Well, thank you again, Dr. Jones, and to Bentonville High School for hosting us today. And thank you to Arkansas Children's and University of Arkansas Medical Sciences for partnering with us to bring this educational program. Again, as I said at the beginning, we're going to take information and highlights from Monday's summit as well as today's summit and to put it all together in a package so that way we can distribute it through the Department of Education to our local schools and parents to have this available. If there is something that you all saw or heard that really stuck out in your mind as, wow, that was a great story, or what an incredible image, what a moving image that was, let us know. We want that sort of feedback because we want to know what's working. Those of you all who interact with kids on a regular basis, let us know that this is the sort of thing that will wake them up or get their attention. And if it's not, let's figure it out. Somebody eventually came up with, this is your brain on drugs with those fried eggs. And we're looking for that to resonate. We're looking for, as Dr. Johnson talked about, bringing that set of lungs into every classroom. But we've got a lot of kids out there that need to hear this message. We've got a lot of adults who need to hear this message. For instance, this problem, this epidemic, is something we're all facing. And all of our children, these kids today are going to have health problems that we can't imagine. As I said, who would have thought that this is what we would be addressing in 2019? And so, as you all know, and I know, government doesn't always move at the pace that we would like for it to. And so we need parents to help us protect their kids. We're going to do absolutely everything we can to protect your children, but we need parents, aunts and uncles and grandparents. I know our school administrators do, but we need all of us working together to educate ourselves and to educate young people about these problems so we can protect our kids. As I said earlier, I'm very proud, but relatively new mama. I've got a 15-month-old daughter, and this past weekend, the gal who takes care of her during the day when I'm out and about and working had sent me some pictures and had told me how she had fed Juliana some raviolis, and how she loved these raviolis. They had some great pictures. I'm sure y'all have got pictures of your kids where they've just got food all over them and they're beating it on their high chair. And she was so happy eating these raviolis. Well, and I'm like, oh, great raviolis. Need a lot of those now. And that afternoon, I drove up to Batesville, which is where I'm from, and we came back through some curvy roads. Y'all understand curvy roads in this part of the state. Well, Mama's driving apparently didn't set well, and it was all over the car. My mom was with me. My mom taught elementary special ed 34 years, and so she's just got the patience of Job, and she's in the back seat with Juliana, and she's like, Juliana's getting sick. We're going to want to pull over. Just cool as a cucumber. Oh, I felt so bad. I was so mad at myself for driving fast on those curvy roads, and I was sick that I had made my daughter sick. So the next day, we're back home. Of course, I'm just overprotective now because anytime you try, because she's never gotten sick like that. And I was like, okay, we had some of those raviolis left, so I was like, okay, let me make her happy. She really loved them yesterday. Mama's not going to be driving her today. And I fed her a couple of bites, and she was like, no more. About an hour later, I put her down to take a nap. And I found out it wasn't my driving. It was those raviolis. She got sick again. Well, folks, when our kids are getting sick, you find out immediately what's wrong with them. And you don't hesitate to address the problem. And that's what's going on with vaping. That's what's going on with e-cigarette use, is that we know now. We don't have to wait to find out what the end result is. We know that it's dangerous for them and that it's harmful for them. And so let's help them make those good decisions, because these young people, they truly are. I mean, this is our legacy. When I talk to my dad is my parents are in their mid-late 70s. And the other day I was talking to him and he said, you know, all of us understand when you get to this age that all you really have is your legacy. And your legacy is your child, your children, and their children, and grandchildren. So what sort of legacy are we leaving for our kids if we don't stop this epidemic? Let's make sure Generation Z is NIC-free, and let's stop this vaping epidemic among our school children. Thank you all for being here. God bless you all. God bless us all.